morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me again this morning on Next on the Tee. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and today I have the wonderful privilege of talking with Matt Adams. You know Matt from his show, The Fairways of Life, that airs every weekday morning from 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Sirius XM's PGA Channel. You also know him from his wonderful book, Fairways of Life, Golf Wisdom of the Legends, plus his numerous other books, including several in the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. I'm very excited to have Matt back with me this morning, and we're going to get to him in just a moment. But before we do, we want to get started like we do every week on this show by saluting the brave men and women serving in our military. Thank you. Thank you for your daily sacrifices and all you do to keep the rest of us safe. We also want to thank those of you who have served or are currently serving in every branch of the military and public service. We truly appreciate what you do to preserve our freedoms and our liberties. It's through your strength and efforts that our way of life is even possible. Our sincere thanks as well to Sean Cruz and all the wonderful folks at the Armed Forces Radio Network. It's an honor for us to be a part of your network. You can find our show by going to armedforcesradionetwork.org. We also want to thank everyone listening in on iHeartRadio, as well as great radio sites across the internet like Spreaker.com, Stitcher, TuneIn, Player.fm, and Blog Talk Radio. We also want to give a special shout-out to our good friends, Mike Kovacs, Ben Kerr, Mark Medeski, and the rest of the great staff over at LastWordOnSports.com. Check those guys out online and on Twitter. Their site's absolutely fantastic, contains great content across every sport, and their staff of writers are absolutely wonderful. You're going to love going to their site every single day for your sports news. If you haven't been there yet, check it out online and then bookmark it. Again, LastWordOnSports.com. Plus, if someone's dragging you to the mall or to the grocery store, or you're just tired of the same old on your commute, download the Player.fm or Stitcher app on your smartphone and take us with you. Let us give you something to focus on while you're out and about doing your errands. Our show is brought to you by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods. Former Bengals and Falcons tight end Reggie Kelly has created a wonderful array of products. His salsas, sauces, and spices are all natural, and they're going to liven up every meal or recipe you have. So wow your friends at your next home party or your next tailgate party by adding Kyvan products to everything you're going to put on your menu. Check them out online. You can find them at Kyvan82.com. That's Kyvan, K-Y-V-A-N, the number 82.com. All right, now joining me on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Matt Adams. Like I mentioned a moment ago, I'm sure you all know Matt from the Fairways of Life show on the PGA Tour Channel on Sirius XM. Matt has also been featured on the BBC, ESPN, the Golf Channel, PGA Tour Entertainment, European Tour Productions, and now on the Back Nine Network. He's also the author of 10 books, including several in the Chicken of the Soup for the Soul series, and his Fairways of Life book, which I've got sitting here right next to me, by the way, is absolutely outstanding. He's virtually interviewed every living legend from the golf scene. He's also one of the best interviewers, not only in golf, but in all of sports, and I'm an avid listener to his show every single morning, and I'm honored to have him next on the tee with me this morning. Good morning, Matt. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be with you again.
Matt, so much has been made in the media about our inability to win the Ryder Cup over the last 20 or so years. Your show was flooded with calls for several days about it following this year's matches. I know Tom Watson was a periodic guest on your show, kind of along the journey up to the Ryder Cup. Has it been difficult for you to hear sort of all the post-event criticism he's received?
No, it hasn't been difficult, I would say. I mean, I would say half of it is with merit and half of it is completely an overreaction. Tom Watson did what Tom Watson was brought in to do. He led with an iron fist. It just so happened that game plan didn't work with the team that he had. He also was fated to be up against a very, very strong European side. So I think it's a natural compulsion that people want someone to blame when you have a loss. But the reality is that while he had a part to play in the loss, he wasn't the reason for the loss. He was one of the reasons that the American team did not win. But I do believe that from a philosophy standpoint that he came in with, from a coach's standpoint that he came in with, it just didn't connect with the team. So that would be where I would define the criticism that I think against Tom Watson there was some merit.
Matt, I had Peter Kessler on the show a couple of weeks ago, and Peter suggested they were sort of one dinner short of having the team maybe a little better organized or informed. They had one dinner early in the week where Captain Watson solicited the players, to submit in writing who they wanted to play with. Peter suggested that what they didn't do was have the second dinner where Captain Watson, putting everything up maybe on a flip chart where they could discuss the results and, who wanted to play with who, perhaps discuss, who he thought, good pairings would be, discuss contingency plans if this happened or if that happened, and then sort of go from there. What are your thoughts? Is that something that might have, made it a little better for the players and maybe more successful this go-around?
It may have, but what I was just alluding to in terms of a coaching philosophy would fly in the face of what you were just suggesting, because when Tom Watson was brought in, it was clear from the very beginning, from conversations that I had with people on the inside, both privately and publicly, where they said to me he's not going to be the type captain where he's going to solicit from his players who they do or do not want to play with. He's going to go out there much more in a Vince Lombardi approach and say, go out there and beat him, team. I'll take care of the details. I'll tell you who you're playing with. I'll tell you when you're playing. I'll tell you when you're going to sit, and you're going to go out there and you're going to perform, and you're going to run through that wall for me because I'm Tom Watson. And that was the mentality and the approach that he brought to fore. And as mentioned, it didn't work. So while the suggestion of one more dinner or a flip chart or, more touchy-feely coaching style, who would you like to play with or who wouldn't you like to play with, would probably have been effective, that was not the type captaincy or approach that Tom Watson was bringing to this Ryder Cup.
Yeah, absolutely right. Old school. I'm with you. Matt, you had Bernhard Langer on your show on Thursday. He was so dominant on the Champions Tour this year. Won 5 times, finished in the top 3, an amazing 12 times in 20 events that he played. He's in such great physical shape at age 57. Speaking of Tom Watson, could Langer pull a Tom Watson and contend perhaps in a major still at age 57 plus?
Oh yeah, I mean there's no doubt about it. It would have to be on the right facility, because today's players on the regular tour are just so long that the courses reflect that. But he has the game, he has the nerve, and that's the thing that's interesting, especially given his history and the fact that a couple of times, across the course of it, he's had to fight yips. But now with the longer putter, he's got that settled down. But his ball striking is so solid. And if you heard it, Bernhard, on the show the other day, he was talking about how his swing has evolved over the years from the original kind of reverse C to now the way he finishes with his right shoulder facing at the target. He's still hitting the ball so solidly and hitting it to the spots that he wants to hit it to. So when you look at it from that perspective, there are courses that he could contend on. There are places that he could win. So, yeah, he could do a Tom Watson at this point. And what's interesting about it is that if you look at the dominance that he's displaying right now at age 57, Tom Watson was not displaying the same degree of dominance at the age of 57 that Langer is right now. So if you had to compare apples to apples, it would be fair to say that Bernhard's probably in a position where he's even more likely to do what Tom Watson did, believe it or not. That's just how well he's playing, and that's not taking anything away from what Tom Watson nearly accomplished in 2009 at Turnberry.
Right. Matt, one of the things that people may not know about you, unless they've done some research, is that you've actually been a golf club designer for companies like Nicklaus Golf and McGregor, to name just a couple. I've always been a huge fan of Mr. Nicklaus's. I still play a Nicklaus driver 3 and 5 wood. Are you surprised that his equipment brand didn't do better in the U.S.?
No, I'm not really, to tell you the truth. When I worked on the equipment side of the business, it started to change when Callaway came out with the Big Bertha. And the kind of the watershed moment of the golf equipment industry is when a piece of equipment suddenly costs you as much or more than a refrigerator. And I always think that when a piece of equipment requires your spouse's approval before you can buy it, because the piece of equipment goes from being a recreational sporting good item to becoming a durable good in terms of from an economic perspective, it's because of the money that it costs and the investment.
Right.
That was a fundamental shift. And the only way that those companies, because you got to remember, Chris, a golf club is only 3 pieces. and the marketing people want you to believe that a golf club, somehow can be orbiting the moon. But it only has three pieces: a head, a shaft, and a grip. And if you look at the grip and you look at the shaft, commonly that shaft and that grip can be found on multiple clubs across the spectrum. So what are we talking about then? Now you're down to one piece that is unique, and it's the head. So in order to command the money that they were charging back in those days, and still today when it comes out new for golf clubs, they had to pour a tremendous amount of money into the marketing of it. They had to justify to people that this product was used to it. So while Jack Nicklaus's name still carries and is revered as probably the most respected in the game of golf, unless you had the millions and millions and millions of dollars behind the introduction of every product to support and promote and get tour brand awareness and exposure and player endorsements and all that goes with it, almost any name would be doomed to the background, because you had these massive and public corporations that were out there promoting their products. So it was a natural economic cycle, and I don't even think it had really anything to do with Mr. Nicklaus's name per se.
So to your point, Matt, when you look at every year, right, new models, Callaway comes out with a new model every year, TaylorMade, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone's got a new model of driver and irons that come out every year. And we're always, pushing the edge of, what is legal within, the USGA rules. Is it all marketing? Is this year's model not going to be good enough for next year because it's, where else can equipment go that we haven't already come to the edge of what we're allowed to do theoretically?
Well, I mean, it's not all marketing, but it's probably 80% marketing. There is real technology there. The bigger problem that the equipment companies have, and then thus the retailers have, is that the product cycles are too fast. And the reason they're doing that is they have to make these quarterly performance reports, so they jam new product into the marketplace. To those companies, they do believe that every time a new product comes out, it's better than the last. But in fairness, if we picked up 20 yards with every new driver that's come out, we'd all be hitting it 800 yards right now.
Right.
But having said that, they truly do believe that it's better than the last. However, in terms of the question that you asked, Chris, about the technology and where are we at, are we up against the walls of physics? We are, in terms of a club head's performance relative to the ball's reaction against the face, in terms of what kind of distance you can get. So what they're dealing with now with technology, which continues to be tuned, is what happens when the ball is hit on an off-center strike, which is the majority of strikes for amateur golfers, either high in the toe or low in the heel or any combination therein. So the better they balance that and the better that they work on that and the better they get reflective materials for the same, then the better performance that they can enact. And so that is real. I'm not denying that there is viability and all that. And frankly, I'm amazed every year at the PGA show that the engineers can come out with what they do. It's absolutely fascinating to me, but it's still only a matter of tiny degrees when you get right down to it.
Mm-hmm. Matt, there's a quote from you in your book, Fairways of Life, that I think is absolutely true, and I'd like you to explain your thoughts on. You wrote, "In our quest to master a game that cannot be mastered, golf is foremost about self-discovery. A person revealed to the world in a round of golf. Even more so, we are revealed to ourselves. Our character, integrity, morality are all put to the test, and our ability to handle pressure is put to the fire. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, and if we are observant each time, we learn something new, something that keeps us coming back." What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that one of the things, to in reverse order, one of the things that makes golf so special is I always think it gives you that one shot that keeps you coming back, that one shot that goes from the ball to the club face, up the shafts, through your hands, through your arms, and directly into your soul. And it's that connection that goes, yes, it may be one, it may have been a putt, it may have been a chip, it may have been an iron shot, it may have been off the tee, whatever it was, for that one fraction of a second, you were every bit as good as the best in the world, which is what makes this game so very unique. But one of the things that amazes me about the sport is that you have people that they can be captains of industry in whatever the particular field that they're in. They can be great, great champions. But when it comes to that, for example, the 3-foot putt, they feel as though their insecurity is laid bare and exposed to the world. And it's always very curious to me that golf does that, because it's not about bravado. It's not about what we hope people will believe from us and of us. It's just this raw exposure of who we are and how we react. And one of the things that I think that makes it so unique is that almost every round, I can't think of one where you wouldn't have had the opportunity, you can make a choice. Are you going to try to cut a corner? Are you going to try to cheat the situation? Or are you going to play the ball as it lies? Do you know what I'm saying? Where in any round of golf, and many of us have played with people that would try to take advantage of such, and even if you've done that, it causes me to say, what was your reason for doing it? What did you hope to gain by shaving a stroke on a hole where the person kind of lost count what you had, and they said, what did you have there? And you said a 5 or a 6 when you knew it was a 7 or an 8 or what have you, whatever the particular scenario is. What was the reason why you did that? And so I think golf constantly asks of us, first of all, the highest ideals of integrity and the best of who and what I think humanity can be, but it also asks us the lingering questions if we have failed in that regard. And it even happens in small little ways. You're out playing golf in the afternoon, there's not another soul around. Your ball goes into a fairway bunker, you go down there and you strike the ball, you had to step over the rake to get in there and to get back out again. Did you rake that bunker? Or was it for convenience sake that you didn't because you said, nobody's out here, nobody's going to see me, it really doesn't matter? Well, I do think it matters, and I think it matters to you and to your conscience and who you are and how you see yourself as a person. And golf has very high standards, and it asks that of all of us.
Yeah, absolutely right. You know, Matt, there's another quote in your book, from Mr. Nicklaus, and he says, success depends almost entirely on how effectively you learn to manage the game's two ultimate adversaries, the course and yourself, right? Sort of, piggybacking on what you just said. Now, to Mr. Nicklaus's point, golf has always been thought about as it's a solitary game. It's not a team sport, and at its core, it's a field of men and women, against the course, and the person who manages it the best over that 4-day span wins the golf tournament. But nowadays, players have, such an entourage, Matt. Players have swing coaches, sports psychologists, managers, publicists, people handling their social media accounts, et cetera, et cetera. The greats of the game, the Hogans, the Nelsons, the Nicklauses, Palmers, players, they didn't have extra people always in their ear. Is it too much noise now for people in the game?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, the game of golf at its highest levels in the PGA Tour is still a massive entertainment circus. And you have to remember that these guys are entertainers. That's why we're out there watching them play on the PGA Tour. And the bigger the field of entertainment, the more money that's engaged in it, the more that they're being honed as athletes in terms of how they swing and how they eat, how they work out. I mean, you look at Rory McIlroy, who in the last 5 years, I was going to say the last decade, but even more accurately, the last 5 years, has gone from a relatively pudgy kid to being this sculpted, lean golfing machine. Well, he's doing that because he feels that he has to do that. It's a standard that was set by Tiger Woods in order to be the number one ranked golfer in the world, and certainly his driving distance would seem to suggest as much to him. So I don't begrudge the players for all of that. I respect the fact that the generations before them didn't have that and didn't need that, but those generations didn't play in what is this massive media and entertainment circus that these guys are today. So if that's what it takes for them to be the golfer that they want to be or think they can be, more power to them.
Mr. Nicklaus always said that there were only a handful of guys who thought they were capable of winning majors. And on Sunday, he always thought, they're all going to choke, and I'm not. What do you think is the difference, for guys that can actually think that they can win a major, and what goes on, between their ears that maybe not so much for other guys?
Well, I think it's a matter of nerve, isn't it? And I saw it most recently at the Ryder Cup in Glen Eagles because I was doing the international broadcast from it. So I was right there. It's interesting, Chris, because in Europe, radio access is the exact same as television. So you're shoulder to shoulder with the guys watching all this stuff go down. And what I was seeing in a lot of the American players was that at the time that they had to make a putt, at the time that they had to be able to exercise the highest performance of nerve, they were unable to. Now, that oftentimes is a learned trait. If you look at, for example, the career of Tom Watson very much had to learn that from the early days when he used to blow a lot of opportunities until the height of his prowess when he would close, obviously, one major after another, having 8 compiled. Nick Faldo had a very similar, he was at one point called Nick Foldo because of his propensity to lose right when he had victory within his grasp. And so it's a learning process, I believe, and for whatever reason, the Europeans right now are ahead on that curve. They are making the putts that they need to make at the time they need to make them. It's that nerve. And if you look at it from the standpoint of majors, you had Martin Keimer winning the U.S. Open, you had Rory McIlroy winning the latter 2. So Europeans won 3 of the 4 major championships in 2014. Now, having said all that, I don't think it's in how they were brought up. I don't think it's in the Venus Schnitzel or the water they were drinking as they were growing up. I think it's cycle. And I think that, A, you're going to get players like Ricky Fowler that's been there enough now that he's going to learn how to close if he hasn't already. And B, I think you're going to have young players coming through the system. I look at players like a Morgan Hoffman or Harris English or even a rookie like Corey Whitsett right now who has a 10-1-1 record in the NCAAs and Palmer Cup and Walker Cup. And I say, we're going to be fine. Billy Horschel's another one that comes to mind. We're going to be fine. Yeah. Just let this cycle play itself out, and you're going to find that the pendulum will, it's not a question of if, the pendulum will swing the other way. It's inevitable.
Matt, I read an article in the Irish Independent where Padraig Harrington talked about how he and his friends would bet on their rounds of golf or who could make the most putts on putting greens. He's quoted as saying, so even the average golfer in the group, after a while, they learned to hold putts to save money or else they couldn't play. They would have to, leave the group because they couldn't afford to keep losing. There are legendary stories, about, what Lee Trevino and Ray Floyd and, guys like that, come to mind where they honed their game, learning how to win and deal with pressure by sometimes having bet more money than they actually had to lose during a match. Have you talked to other players about, how they honed their skills or learning to deal with pressure growing up just because of the side bets that they had to make along the way?
Yeah, I have, and it leads me to another fact of golf today is that, it's natural for all of us to look at the way that the top golfers live, whether we're talking about private jets or fancy cars or, all the things that are the trappings of success at the highest level of golf's largest tour. But there is a reality that for many of these golfers, their pathway has not been paved with gold. In fact, it's been paved with uncertainty and flat-out hard work. And I think that's where many of them are forged. That's where the steel comes from that is forged through the fires of competition and the fact that they may or may not make it. Even when you consider the fact that while golf is at the top tier, very lucrative, and it's quite easy to focus on that, the reality also is that you could make $600,000-$700,000, $1 million in gross earnings in a year, and you lose your card. I mean, that's a pretty bitter pill to swallow as well. So I think that's where players really become who they are in terms of what did you have to do to get there? How much did you have to scrape and claw? How often were you out there at the crack of dawn or as darkness was setting in when there was no one else around to see you doing what you're doing? That's where I really believe that champions are made. I do hear the comments from people often that because of the money, it's possible for people to coast and just kind of get by and make a nice living and be a journeyman golfer that really never contends. They have a few high finishes in their career, but they end up making a lot of dough. Well, you know what? The reality is those guys exist in every sport where they're there for a few years, they get paid well, and they play a utility role, and that's about the end of it. But I'm talking here about real champions. And what I've seen with real champions, there's a fire in their eyes, there's a fire that burns in their soul, and it's not about money. It's about winning. And those are the guys that, obviously, again, I'm thinking someone like a Rory McIlroy, where you look at a person like that and you go, you know what, they could have $1 billion in their pocket and they're still going to go out there and want to win every tournament because they're chasing something that you can't put a dollar figure on. They're chasing history.
Yeah, no, and to your point, again, being such a big fan of Mr. Nicklaus, that's something that he always talked about, right? He never played for the money. He played for the trophies and the title, right? Figuring that the money would come along. You win enough trophies and titles, the money's going to be there, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the career of Jack Nicklaus and look at what he accomplished, I liken Jack Nicklaus to Michelangelo or even the Beatles, in that I think when you have true genius, it defies the period in which it exists. It cuts right through the years, the generation, even the centuries. And if you look at Jack Nicklaus's swing now, go back and look at some of the videos of Jack Nicklaus striking the golf ball. It is an absolutely remarkable golf swing that generates massive power, so much so I'm kind of surprised that there aren't, huge schools of teaching just devoted to trying to replicate his swing, because even now in his 70s, when you see him swing, his swing looks powerful for his age, but it looks unique enough that you say, my gosh, why isn't everybody doing that same thing right now? It speaks of an age when golf swings, I think it's the case today, but it was even more so back in the golden era, that they were truly fingerprints, and his was one that has left a discernible mark that will, I think, carry on through the ages for many to come.
No, that's a great point. And speaking of swings, Matt, several years ago, Padraig Harrington was at the top of the sport, during his run of 3 majors, sort of his run at the Potty Slam, and shortly thereafter, he changed his swing. I've lost track of the number of variations, of a swing that Tiger is currently on. I had the opportunity to talk to Bobby Clampett a couple of months ago, and he said he had so many people in his ear giving him swing thoughts that it ruined his swing. Why do you think guys who are so successful find it necessary to try to completely change things instead of staying with what has been tried and true and worked for them?
Because it's the edge. It's what we were talking about earlier, that the pressure is so high and so big. And these guys are not just an individual going out and playing golf. They are brands, and they are individual businesses of their own that at the top tier, the tiers we were talking about, Padraig or Tiger or any of the other top players, nowadays they are massive corporations, global corporations that. So if they can pick up a quarter of a stroke, a half a stroke, if fate smiles upon them in a round in the course of a tournament, it equates to, at the end of the year, a massive difference in performance and in the wins column. So I understand why they have the insecurity of the pursuit. I understand why they have the hopefulness of the pursuit. It's just sometimes you're searching for something that's so elusive that you don't even realize that you already had it before you began the pursuit. But the pressure is there for them to constantly search for something else. And frankly, it permeates every level of the tour to some degree, not quite to the same dramatic degree that we just laid out. But if you look at a particular style, whether it's a grip style or putter length or stroke, whatever it is, and I'm just talking about putting, it could be with chipping, it could be any other aspect of the game. And if a player starts to have success with it, you'll notice other players on the range start to look over and go, okay, that's something that's working over there. I might give it a try too, but that's been going on forever.
Matt, just a couple more before we let you go. Speaking of the mental side of the game, in your book you have a quote from Sergio Garcia about how much he loves the Ryder Cup. And he has been, a good Ryder Cup player. Not a great one, but a good Ryder Cup player. He's 3-6 in singles matches, but in 4-ball and the foursome matches, his pairings are tough to beat. He's 16-4-4 when paired with somebody. Is that another example of how powerful the mental side of the game is? Sergio is great when he's got someone there with him and to feed off of, but on his own, it's a little tougher for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't phrase it that he's feeding off them necessarily. Rather, he's making sure that he doesn't let them down. There is, and it's the same thing that we see exercised in military mentality all the time. They'll flat out tell you may be standing alongside of someone that you cannot stand, but if that person goes up that staircase or they storm through that doorway, you're going to be right there on them. You're going to have their back, and you know that they have yours. And what Sergio has in that setting is very common to the Spanish golfers that preceded him, Seve, Ali, all the rest. They were the exact same way, that in that setting they are not going to let their partner down, and so he performs with it. I believe when he's set on the stage at the highest level, again, it's this neuron clicking in their brain, the nerves that are trying to connect. And when he's out there by himself, scar tissue and demons start to creep in, and it has affected him in the past. And every time we see Sergio get close, that creeps back up again right at the moment when he does not need it to. and it's affected him. I know that he's playing better. I'm glad that he's playing better. I'm glad that he's putting better. But I have a feeling that if Sergio is destined to win a major championship, it's going to be a come-from-behind win in a major championship and not leading from out in front of the pack.
Matt, I've said many times on this show that Augusta National is my favorite place on the planet. My experiences have all been on the patron side of the ropes. What are some of your favorite stories from being on the grounds?
Augusta National, what I think makes Augusta National so special is first and foremost that it takes place in April every spring. And even now, here we are in early November, and we're talking about the Masters in Augusta National. It does that. It gets people so fired up and so excited that by the time that it comes, I remember someone calling my show, Chris, a guy ends up getting a whole bunch of flat screen 3D TVs, and he puts them in a massive tent, and he has this huge barbecue. It's like in Texas, this fellow is. It's as if he has a huge tailgate built around the Masters. When you think about the level of excitement that's built there, and it's because it's our first major of the year, that in and of itself makes it so very special. And then when you're there, and through the whispering of the winds through the pines, you can hear the echoes of Masters past, whether we're talking about, Bobby Jones when he started the whole thing, or whether we're talking about, Gene Sarazen's 4-wood and his Albatross, or whether we're moving forward to, Snead and Hogan going at it in 54 in a playoff that Snead won, and it was one of his highest achievements of his life because he was able to edge Ben Hogan in that setting. Or you get to Arnold Palmer's multiple wins, very much to the chagrin and sadness of Ken Venturi through the first couple, and then Jack Nicklaus through his reign. It's just those stories seem somehow to be intertwined with the presence when you're on the grounds of Augusta National. And for all of those reasons and all of that emotion, I think that is why the Masters is held so close to the heart of anyone that knows and loves the game.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Matt, I want to end our time together this morning by quoting you. If we are all destined to miss our share of 3-foot putts of life, then can we at least seek to increase our odds of success through preparation and a conviction that not only are we capable of success, but we deserve it. I agree that we all need positive reinforcement, and sometimes we have to kind of give it to ourselves. I want to thank you for being a positive way for us to start out our mornings every day on your Fairways of Life show. I want to thank you for the books that you've written that all make us feel ultimately uplifted, because I think that's important in life. No matter what the situations, the stripes that we have to deal with, or feedback that we have to get, or things that we have to deal with in our day-to-day lives, ultimately we all need to be uplifted, and you do a wonderful job of doing that through your show and through your books, and I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your morning to be here with me.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Have a great one.
All right, take care, Matty.
Bye now.
Matt Adams, what a great person Matt Adams is. His shows are absolutely outstanding, and I can't recommend his books enough. Fairways of Life, Golf Wisdom of the Legends. It's a wonderful read. So many great, quotes throughout the book, so many great stories throughout the book. If you haven't gotten it yet, you need to go. You can find it on Matt's site as well as on Amazon.com. Really a wonderful read. All right, before we close up shop, speaking of wonderful reads, I want to let you know about a book that's out there, a wonderful new book. It's called A Golden 18, written by Roger Schiffman, and the photography is by a friend of ours and one of the great photographers anywhere on the planet, Jim Mandeville. Jim, as I'm sure you know, is the director of photography at the Nicklaus Companies. The book showcases some of Mr. Nicklaus's greatest course designs. The stories about the courses are great. The photography is simply outstanding. In fact, the photographs in the book are so good, you're going to want to get a second copy of the book so you can take some of those pictures out and frame them. To get your copy, go to nicklaus.com and hover over Products and Partners and then click on Books and Videos. If you love golf and simply stunning photography, you're going to love this book. All right, everybody, it's time for me to put a bow on this one. My sincere thanks once again to Matt Adams for being such a great guest and being a part of the show with me this morning. I can't thank him enough for being here, and I thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you the most. Please also check out our sister show, Thursday Night Tailgate, with me and my co-host Bob Lazari, our announcer Joe Lajanusa. That show airs live every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find it on Blog Talk Radio. It's also rebroadcast Friday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Boost Radio, as well as on the Armed Forces Radio Network. We're joined every week by legends from around the NFL and the CFL. Plus, also check out both shows on Facebook. That's important to us, too. Give us a like, ThursdayNightTailgate.com, Next on the Tee. You can find us online, this show, nextonthetee.net, and ThursdayNightTailgate.com. Plus, you can stream or download any of our archived episodes for free and keep up to date with who our future guests are on both sites. I thank you again for choosing to listen to this show and to be up with me this morning. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.